Welcome to our time of review as we seek to solidify our reading and place it back into the meta narrative. What I want to start with is the very end of our reading this last week, because I think this story really captures what's taking place with Israel. So Jeremiah is instructed by the Lord to bring in the Rechabite people and command them to drink wine. Well, what do we know about them? The Rechabite people were led by their forefather 200 years prior to abstain from all wine, to not build houses and live in them. They were going to be nomads. And further, they were not permitted to sow seed and harvest a field. So they were truly sojourners in the land. Well, what's interesting about these people is for 200 years they obeyed Jonadab. And so here, therefore, they reject the wine that's offered to them. And God uses this as an object lesson. Now, this is not the first time or the last time in Israel's history that God is going to use an object lesson to get their attention. But what it does is it highlights the prolonged disobedience of the children of Israel. So let's bring it back to Jeremiah. So Jeremiah is prophesying during this time. And this is a time where he's already prophesied under the reign of Josiah. And he moves to the next king because he prophesies during that 40-year period over the reigns of five different kings. So this is the year 605. And so now you have the first wave of captivity by the Babylonians. They come in, they besiege Jerusalem, and they take out the brightest and the best, the royal. This is the wave of captivity where Daniel and his friends are taking into Babylon. So here we are. They're in Jerusalem. And so what does God call this prophet to do? Because they need some object lessons. So, wow, how does he offer this? Well, one of the first things Jeremiah does is he goes to street preaching, because God commands him to get out in the streets and preach to the people. So he embraces street preaching. And I don't know if you've ever been involved or you've seen a street preacher, but it's very uncomfortable. I saw a street preacher a few years ago when I was traveling with my daughter somewhere. And wow, they were so passionate about what they did. People made fun of them. They walked past them. They ignored them. But you know what? What you could tell, they were passionate about what they did, and they strongly believed that the gospel was the power of God into salvation. And so they so believed that they were willing to put them on a street corner in a very busy section of Nashville during a weekend of country music and so on. And so as Jennifer and I observed them, after they finished preaching, we went over there and we befriended them and began to talk to them. And, and what really drove them was the urgency of the gospel. They were there on the street corner because they saw those partiers as people who were lost. And they knew that they would stand before God one day and give an account for all the people in their generation that they had not reached, that they had the opportunity to reach but did not. So here God calls Jeremiah as a street preacher. Why? Because he had an urgent message for them that judgment was imminent, that unless they turned back, a last-minute effort of repenting before the Lord, that they were doomed for continual captivity, for being besieged even further by the Babylonians. So he's a street preacher. Not only that, as you see that God also commands this man, don't get married. Why was that? Because part of it is God was saving him for the heartache of raising his children and having to say bye to his children as they go off into captivity. But more than that, it was to demonstrate to him, you know what? There are no more children for me to have from these people. That God, in many ways, he had chosen to live a separate life from his people, that he was no longer connected them in the marital way that he had started out with his people, because his people had so betrayed him. In fact, one of the things you see continually through the prophets is God uses this language, that they're the spirit of harlotry, that they've committed a harlotry, and like a marriage situation where the wife is departing and that she's playing a prostitute. That's the role that Israel has in this time. So God uses Jeremiah as an object lesson in his remaining a single. Not only that, you see that Jeremiah is also commanded not to intercede for Jerusalem. Well, that's kind of confusing to me, because I think that's what a prophet does besides proclaiming the Lord. But when God says don't even pray for them, what God is saying is there's nothing that will turn them back now, because they have so hardened their heart. It wasn't that God was not willing to hear Jeremiah. No, it was that the people, that God had done everything he possibly could to turn their hearts back to him, but they were resistant towards the living God. So he said, don't even pray for those people. When God says don't even pray for those people, that means there's no mercy left coming from the throne of God. Further, Jeremiah, in the midst of this, offers hope for succeeding generations, because he begins to promote this new liberation that's going to come in their future, this this new exodus. And this time, this is going to be the exodus of those who go into captivity, that God's going to bring them back at the end of 70 years. And they will rebuild the land. They will rebuild the temple. Why? Because God is committed to his agenda. So Jeremiah foresees the coming of the branch of righteousness in the reading this last week, if we track backwards. So what you see here during this reading is we put it back into the context of the storyline of the Bible, as that God made promises to the children of Israel way back in Abraham's day, saying, I'm going to bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you, and you all the families of the earth will be blessed. And then through Moses, he gave them the laws and the rules and the regulations and judgments and so on that were connected to their spiritual vitality. And of course, they right off the top said, oh, everything the Lord says to do, we will obey. So put that into the light of the Rechabites. See, they had Jonadab who gave them these rules and regulations, but Israel had God, had Moses, how God established a standard for them, and they didn't keep it even for one generation. So what you see from this story and during this period of Israel's history is God is long-suffering, but there is a cutoff date to the long-suffering of God. He will eventually move against his own people who harden their hearts towards him. So I see, as the reading this last week, it is a strong warning to Iva May. Do not harden your heart. Stay pliable before the Lord. Give God access to your life so that you don't harden your heart towards him, so that he doesn't resist you. Happy reading.